Well, first I have to warn you that I don't have the English of René. Nobody have the English of René. But thank you very much, first to the ECPM for inviting me, for being such a good friend of Israel, to Member of Parliament Skripek, and of course to my friend MEP Belder, to René, Leo, and Deputy Ambassador of Israel. Thank you, all of you, distinguished guests, for coming here today. Members of the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. I'm actually truly honored and exciting, although it's not my first time, to be here again with you today at the European Parliament, which is actually the place which represents all citizens and all inhabitants of Europe, people of all faiths, all background, a true bastion of democratic ideals. A European Union that, above all the differences that you are having, and you have differences, represent an underlying unity, the respect for the other, and the aspiration to live in peace in this very important continent. A continent that has experienced war before, a bloodshed, division, and disasters, but come out the other side, lucky for you, of course, not without challenges, with many, many challenges, but with strong and united hand. Unfortunately, I cannot say the same about our region, the Middle East, a region which Israelis still dreams every day, and actually also praying about becoming more stable and peaceful. However, when searching for a natural starting point for my speech today, I thought about the fact that the vast majority of you here today, correct me if I'm wrong, are Christians. So allow me a word on the subject before I will touch the terror issue. In fact, the majority of Europeans are still self-defining Christians, yet in Israel, Christians are only 2% of the population. Despite this small number, I'm very proud to say that Israel is maybe the only country in the Middle East with a growing Christian population. And it's not an obvious thing in the Middle East. And as Jerusalemite, one that lives in Jerusalem, chose to live in Jerusalem, I can personally testify that the Christians in Israel are not only an integral part of Jerusalem and Israel, but also maybe the best ambassadors of Christianity in the Holy Land, and perhaps maybe in the entire Middle East. And it's important for me, that you will know that the strong connections of the Christians to Israel, to the Holy Land, and to the holy sites in Israel, places of our Holy Bible, creates an unbreakable bond with Israel and, of course, with us, Jewish people. We, Jews and Christians in Israel, understand that there is no other way than stand together, work together, and overcome the challenges together if we want to have a much brighter and more stable future. And unfortunately, it was just a couple of months ago that UNESCO took the worthless and hypocritical decision which undermines the connection between the Jewish people and Jerusalem. And many of you here, some of you I know personally, condemn this ignorant and malicious decision and recognize the historic, unbreakable, and holy connection between the Jews in Jerusalem and subsequently between the Christians and Jerusalem. And our Christian friends recognize the historical truth that Jews were always part of Jerusalem, and that Jerusalem was always part of Judaism, as much, by the way, as Jerusalem will always be part of Christianity. Now, history, we're sitting in a parliament that takes many decisions every day. I'm a member of a parliament, but history cannot be changed by a biased political decision or a resolution. And if an organization like UNESCO denies this simple truth, it only mocks itself. I told my colleagues in UNESCO, and I have some, if you want to find proof to the connection between Jerusalem and the Jewish people, you don't have to Google it. You should just do a very simple action and open the Bible or open the Holy Testimony. And it's very simple. When UNESCO denies the connection of the Jews to Jerusalem, UNESCO denies the connection of the Christians to Jerusalem, and ironically, also of the Muslims to Jerusalem. And they should be ashamed. And I'm sorry that I'm so straightforward, mainly because they know the truth. And as it is written in the New Testimony, the truth shall set you free. And I hope and pray that one day the truth will also set UNESCO free. Now to our topic, my friends. A few weeks after my last visit here to this peaceful city of Brussels, a horrible, evil, and barbaric terror attack took place here, taking the lives of innocent people, something that we know in Israel. Now, those people who committed these crimes are not messengers of God, they are not messengers of good, and they are definitely not freedom fighters, as some of them try to describe themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, they have no noble cause and no justification for their actions. The opposite, actually, is true. They are messengers of evil, of death, and of barbaric and very, very dark purpose. The one and only connection between them and God will be maybe one day in the judgment day, when they will face him and will be judged for their crimes. Those terrorists claim that they fight for a great purpose or some twisted ideology. But the fact is that terror is not an ideology. Exactly like murder or rape can never be an ideology. Taking other people's lives will never be an ideology and can never ever be in the name of God. Not our God, at least. And as you know, Israel has suffered many times, endless amount of terror attacks. But we have never caved in. We Israelis are resilient, stiff-necked people, and the people of Belgium and France, of Europe, who continues to live their life and thrive, are also demonstrating that terror will not and cannot and should not ever win. Those terrorists believes, and we have many researchers about terror behaviors, that the ends justify the means. But Israel proves those terrorists throughout almost 70 years of battling with terror that their means, terror activities, actually diminishes their goals. And as someone who, I even tell my colleagues, and there is a lot of them of Israel, that believe that one day maybe a Palestinian state should be next to Israel. Even to those who believe that a Palestinian state should happen, I can show how the Palestinian terror pushes away the Palestinian dream for a state of their own. It's not promoting it, and they should understand it. And therefore, we have to make terrorists understand that terror is and always will be counterproductive to any goal that they will want to achieve or reach in the future. We should prove them that noble goals can only be achieved through noble means, and they don't understand that. Now, as you probably know, if you live in Europe, Europe is currently in a bin. There is serious dilemmas on the table that you are dealing with every day, also here in the Parliament. Today, you face a huge wave of refugees here in Europe, and this is absolutely not an easy matter. Now, I have to be honest and tell you that, to my belief, most of these refugees are decent people who seek better life. Most of them have suffered probably more than anyone else in this room could possibly imagine. Most of them are truly unlucky people who faced terrible reality that made them run away from home and escape death with promise to a better life here in Europe. However, it's also important to remember that there is also no doubt that the recent flood of refugees to Europe can be manipulated, and is actually manipulated by terrorist organizations, and we've already seen some tragic examples of these tactics. The Syrian civil war and the Islamic State are fueling daily what we call, or they call, the global jihad. And This gives some terrorists the impression that they can change the world, or they can change our world. And the clash of civilizations, as Samuel Huntington wrote, is here actually, and is here now. And I believe that only by standing together and fighting this extremism can we show that they are on the wrong side of history and that eventually they will lose. So don't understand me wrong, a humane policy towards real refugees, and I know that you have humane policy towards real refugees, must be combined with a shrewd counterterrorism policy focusing on two main components: infrastructures and motivation. Infrastructures and motivation. The infrastructures of terror, I don't have to tell you, includes weapon bases, commanders, soldiers, and definitely money. And those means, these infrastructures should be aimed and destroyed both at home, here, and abroad, through a mixture of intelligence sharing and a strong shared determination to take the fight to the terrorists and not wait for the terrorists to come to us. Their commanders and soldiers should always tackle our brave soldiers and not our vulnerable and innocent civilians. And if we learned any lesson in Israel, and you ask how we can learn in Israel, is to try to tackle terror and to prevent it in their own background and not to wait until they will come to our backyards. Most of the time we're succeeding, and of course, some of the time we don't. But I just told you in the lunch we had that Israel prevents dozens, sometimes hundreds, of attempts to make terror on Israeli ground every week, every month. So usually we meet the terrorists at their home, at their bases, at their backyard, and not in our. Now, the other thing that I talked about is the motivation element. And the motivation element is much more complex to deal with. And as we have to kill our enemies before they are killing us, we also have to kill their motivation to act, and also the motivation of others to join them, to join terrorist cells in Europe, in the Middle East, and definitely in Israel. The best weapon against that motivation is two. In one hand, providing hope, and in the other hand, zero tolerance to terror. And this is what we are trying to do, providing hope and zero tolerance toward terror. Now, the more refugees, for example, here in Europe, who will see hope in their life, who will see a bright future for their children, then less of them will even consider to join terror. And the lower the tolerance and concessions to terror will be, the less people will consider joining terror organizations here in Europe. And you know that there is not one or two sleepy cells of terror here on European ground. My friends, you mentioned the Intifada. Following the last wave of terror in Israel, aka the knife Intifada, that, by the way, I anticipated a couple of months ago in a diplomatic outline that I presented. But following this Intifada, I asked IPCRI to perform a research about the terrorist background, their motivation, why someone is becoming a terrorist, what is the profile, why they are doing it, why a person one day decide to become a terrorist, including 13 and 12 years old children. Okay, it's amazing to think, why? And I invite you, of course, to read the whole paper. I will send it to you, Mr. Belder, and you can share it. But one very important conclusion of this paper is that our Shin Bet, which is our Israeli security agency, their analysis find that the motivation of the terrorist is derived from a sense of national, economic, personal, and gender-based discrimination. By the way, 7 of those perpetrators in the last Knives Intifada were women, some of them actually very young women. So, sense of national, economic, personal, and gender-based discrimination. These attacks, in the analysis, we find that these attacks were seen as means of escaping hopeless situation that, in their view, cannot be changed. Which means that if they will think it can be changed, maybe they will prevent terror. And that is why among the Palestinians and among the refugees here in the EU, we have to separate, to try to do whatever we can to separate the terrorists from the general peaceful majority inside these communities. And one way to do this separation is first to try and separate those people to two kinds. To those who want to live here next to us, and those who want to live here instead of us. And this is a very, very important division. And whenever I speak, I'm involved in the peace process and I'm trying to do whatever I can in order to have peace with the Palestinians. I think it's also an Israeli interest. But when I meet my Palestinian colleagues, I ask them, now you are our enemies. We want to make peace with you. But first, tell me, do you want to live here next to me or instead of me? I want to know the truth. Now, with those who want to live here next to us, or at least say so, we have a real duty and obligation to cooperate, to try and find solutions, to advance the societies, and to try and find the golden path to peace. And by the way, when my Palestinian colleagues tell me that Israel is the one that don't want peace, I'm reminding them that not like them, Israel made peace twice with much bigger and bitter enemies with the Palestinians, with all the respect to the Palestinians, with Egypt and Jordan. So Israel aspires to peace. It's not always possible, it's not always easy, but it is aspire to peace. I'm leading the two-state solution caucus in the Knesset, for example. So with those who want to live here next to us, we have the obligation as Israelis, as Jews, to try and find the golden path for peace. However, with those who want to live here instead of us, and there is a lot of Muslims, Palestinians, and enemies of Israel that saying, clear and loud, we want to wipe you out of the map, we want to live here instead of you. To those who say they want to live here instead of us, we have to look straight in the eyes and tell them loud and clear. It will never, ever happen. Never. And if they will understand it, the battle will be easier. We have to fight these elements fearlessly and with all the means that we have. Now, again, fight them with zero tolerance and seek peace, on the other hand, in every corner we can. To conclude, I want to suggest, and actually to encourage all of us here, to do 3 or 4 things in light of what I just described here. First, and this is my suggestions, to address Muslim societies, whether it be the refugees in Europe or our Palestinian neighbors or Israeli Arabs, and indeed Muslim communities around the world, and tell them, do not be a player in the theater of terror. Don't choose this way because at the end of the road, you will lose. Don't be a player in the theater of terror. We know and understand that most of you are peaceful, most Muslims are not a terrorist or terror supporters, and most Muslims can actually be a key to the solution rather than a problem. The terrorist wants us to believe that they are the majority, that they are the superpower. But they are not a superpower, rather they are superfluous and they should be always defeated. Second suggestion I give you is that we should all fight anti-Semitism here in Europe and all around the world, and we should all fight the BDS movement and all the different boycotters around the world that seeks to single out the Jewish state. And in fact, anti-Semitism, anti-Judaism, and BDS actually provide just the sort of environment of hatred and ignorance that breeds terrorists. We should fight those evil forces on the one hand, and on the other hand, strengthen the moderate majority and those who seek peace. And third, cooperate with Israel. I invite you to cooperate with Israel. Israel is a world leader today, both in counter-terrorism theory and in counter-terrorism practice. And the reason to cooperate with Israel is very simple. Not because just the experience, but because the terrorists are getting stronger and stronger and much more sophisticated, and no one has more experience in defeating terror than Israel. Now, as open democracies, we have the luxury sometimes to debate of how to fight terror and when to fight terror and if to fight terror. And while these debates is crucial and of course important, it must not paralyze us in the war against terror. We have to cooperate, we have to fight terror, and we have to debate all in the same very time. If we do so, terror will have no means, no motivation, and no hope. Fourth things, and maybe last, is be in touch, and this is maybe a request, with our Jewish community. We have an amazing Jewish communities here in Brussels, all over Europe, Jewish people that see in their countries as their home, very smart and strong Jewish communities. Be in touch with them. See what is the reality that they are facing, and not just in light of anti-Semitism. I think that we can learn also a lot from them as Jews that choose to stay and live outside of Israel and not make aliyah to Israel. And I just had an amazing meeting with the Jewish community leaders here in Brussels, and they have their challenges and difficulties. And I ask you, as a representative of your parliaments, to try and help them tackle these problems, not only of anti-Semitism, but also of security. So my friends, to conclude, destroying terror is possible, it's possible, it's doable, and actually Israel is doing it since the day we established in 48 for almost 70 years. It's in our hands, because my small country, Israel, has shown through its history that when the battle is existential, and for Israel it's existential, Israel is the only state in the world that cannot lose a war one time. If we lose a war one time, there is no Israel. So we proved that when the battle is existential, we have no choice but to be victorious. Ladies and gentlemen, this battle against terror and global jihad is existential, and we have, all of us, to be victorious. And we will win this battle together, not only for our own sake, but for the sake of the future generation, or so I hope. So God bless you, and thank you very much.